everyone. This is Arabella, owner and founder of Arabella's Voice Studio, back for episode 13 of In My Musical Opinion. I can't believe we're on episode 13. It feels like we just started this, but I'm excited today to be joined by Taylor Rossi. Now, Taylor is a Boston-based photographer. And I don't want to give away too much of her background. I'll have her tell you about it. But I think this episode is super relevant, and here's why. We usually talk about what it takes to be a musician, what it takes to take it to a professional level. But most of our students don't actually want that. They want to enjoy music for the sake of enjoyment. They want to explore because it's fun to do and find a way that it fits into the life that they already have. And I think Taylor can really give some important insights into that based off her journey. So Taylor, I'm going to hand it over to you to just tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Awesome. So hi, I'm Taylor. I am a photographer here in Boston. But before this, I lived a couple other lives. Kind of to backtrack to where things began, I went to college for music education as a flutist, and my intention was to be a band director. That was what my love was when I was in high school, and then pretty much until senior year of college, where I basically realized I did not want to be in a school setting, which is not the best time to figure out that that's not what you want. But I remember being really just in love with one-on-one teaching and really wanted to focus on my instrument at the time. So I went to grad school for flute performance, which is what brought me to Boston. And after about a year of that, I said, this is awesome. I still love performing and the idea of teaching privately, but I personally don't think I'm going to make enough money doing this to make a living. So I started working at a flute company doing marketing and really loved that side. I kind of love being like a cog in the wheel of an industry of like helping other people make things happen or just supporting them in different ways. So it was really fun to be in the flute industry that way. And then once I started doing some other kind of marketing, I found photography, and if I kind of just kept coming back to it and ultimately decided that that's what I wanted to do full time. And 6 years later, here we are.
That's awesome. I think you and I are kind of rare in that I'm very honest on the podcast as well, that I came from a marketing background and then went into a musical sphere. Like, I studied music my whole life, but I thought I was going to go into like a marketing profession. But I think we're kind of rare in that a lot of times people want this hard line between the artist of music and the administrative marketing business side. Did you have a hard time reconciling those two things, or were you like, no, I'm all in?
I did. I remember when I actually started first working a full-time job outside of being a student, I remember someone saying to me, like, you're not going to perform nearly as much as you did in school. And I was like, that's crazy. Like, it's what you make of it. And I think both sides were kind of true. But I have kind of found that over time, my creative expression and what's fulfilling me creatively has changed and what that looks like. And one of my favorite things about being an adult and also being self-employed is the amount of freedom we have in our choice. Like, for example, during the pandemic, I wound up taking online voice lessons with one of my friends from college. And it was one of the most magical experiences. I love learning as an adult. Like, I think it's just so great that we have that choice. And now it's tough because I haven't touched my flute since December. And before that, it was in the summer. And I do miss it, but I also more so find that the through line for me was working with other people, and collaborating with other people. And I find that very strongly in photography. I know that if I ever need some other kind of like musical creative fulfillment, I can access my flute. I can find groups to play with. I can re-up my skills and ultimately get that. But I think it's looked a lot of different ways since then. It's never been just one thing, if that makes sense.
It does. I love that. I remember when we first met, you were taking photos at an event that we had at the Bebop, which is an open mic event, and you were filling me in on some of your story, and you said something that really hit me, and that was, I can always go back to it because I learned how to learn. I learned
Yeah.
how to, I learned how to practice. So even if I take time off, I don't feel like it's gone. Like I can just pick it back up. It's always there. And I thought that was really profound
Mm.
because we think that, weekly lessons are great. But I like to tell students I'm not in the business of selling weekly lessons. I'm in the business of teaching. Of course, we have to sell a product. I have to pay my rent.
Sure.
I have to put food on my table, but I'm not in the business of convincing you to take a weekly lesson. I am in the business of teaching and I am in the business of providing a product that allows you to take lessons.
Yeah. And I mean, that's how I feel about a lot of different things, even from like going to therapy. I started in 2018, I think, like had my first session, had just no idea there was so many life skills I felt like I was lacking. And now when I still work with the same therapist and we kind of talk and chat and joke and say like, "Oh, I remember when I was so stressed out about this thing where I didn't have the tools that I do now." And I think for the most part, like of course we need reminders about things and it is really helpful whether it's therapy or music lessons or school of some kind, um, that it's good to have access to those and be able to reach out to those people when you want them or when you need them. But there are a lot of things we build over time. And I think that's something that's been really helpful moving from being a student in your teens and early 20s to being an adult, quote unquote. I think there's just so many things we take with us and we kind of build our metaphorical toolbox in whatever way that looks like. And I just try to apply that to whatever it is, even if it's like doing yoga or working out. Like I know that there's people I can reach out to. I know that there's different things I can do. And we live in a world with so many different resources. And I really love that you can kind of pick what works best for you.
Yeah. So a lot of our listeners are familiar with the fact that we have the studio, AVS, we have our piano brand, piano for the vocalist, and I have some other side projects. And one thing that has been maybe a little integrated corporate-y for me is I always write brand values for each of the companies. That's just a practice that has now, I don't know, it's just a practice for me like anything else. But I also have an overarching brand that I consider to encompass all of these things. And I just think it would be interesting for our listeners if I just read two key components from this. So I call this the A flat music studio brand. It encompasses a lot of things for me. And I wrote 2 points back to back. Be in it for the long haul and quit before the point of indifference.
Ooh.
Which, when I read that to people, they think it's opposite, but to me, it's quite the same. Like it made two different points, but I think it's really an extension of the same thing. Because as you said, it's a lifetime practice, and like anything in life, you might concentrate on it more so in some years than others. Like I think about it like learning how to walk. At one point in your life, you had to really concentrate how to put one foot in front of the other, and now you don't. And I think that's sort of what you're saying with music.
Yeah. I love that so much. I actually haven't done that for myself. I feel like it's something that I would love to do to actually sit down and make it more tangible. But I think especially when you're doing something for yourself, whether it is taking lessons or you are running a business, I'm a big believer and practicer of reflection and just reevaluating constantly. And I think that's really necessary in our journey of learning. In being a learner, there's just things that will come into our life, like unlocking something in your voice that you just didn't know before or had access to or didn't know what it feel like or could embody. And it's so nice to be able to reflect on those things and just update within yourself or the way that you practice, like literally in music or practice in the world, um, what that looks like. So conversation is super important. And at the open mic night, it was just so cool to see the variety of the students and what they were singing, and the way that they supported each other was so, so sweet. And even observing that was a reflective moment. Like you never know what you're walking into, um, and how that is going to just give you something to think about. And I thought that was really, really beautiful. And the way you teach your teachers and have those conversations, it's just really cool to see these skills that other people have and to be able to learn from them, or um, just observe them, I think is just amazing.
Well, thank you for that. I really appreciate you saying that. And I have to say, when we first started those open mics, which that's one of my favorite events that we do, all of them have their place, but that one for me is really special. In addition to brand values, a practice that we have as a team is writing down evidence of success. And we try to do that on our online team meetings. And when we first started our first open mic, we had a ton of people come. Like, it was huge. And then the next time it happened, we barely had anyone. Like, I think we had like 3 or 4 people. And I was like, what happened? Like, what did we do differently? Did we just lose the momentum? And I love the bebop. It's, this is not meant to be an ad for the bebop, but that was the spot I went in college to play on a Thursday night because I loved playing, and I would just go to the open mic, and it's really not a lot of pressure. There's a built-in audience, so I didn't have to like advertise it. I could just try things out, and if I did great, everyone cheered, and if I didn't, I never saw those people again. It was wonderful, And so that's why I started bringing students. And so I know I was kind of upset after that second event at the Bebop that we ran because there wasn't a lot of people. And then I started showing up Thursday nights because it was still a safe space for me. And I started seeing students there on those random Thursday nights. And I was like, wait, part of the reason that we're not getting this traction on these events is because you're going regularly. And I'm seeing you there. And like, you didn't need an event to go. You're just going. And so that was a big reflection point for us as a team, where it was like, okay, maybe the events are great because it brings our community together. Or maybe they're good because we just introduce something new to someone and then they can run with it. So that was a really distinct moment, I think, in my practice and for our team as well.
That's so cool. I love that idea of like even just something being an introduction to people. And I think even like just musically, that's like, I remember, being in college and having weekly flute lessons. And there was something after I moved to Boston, it had to be like 2 years in. There was something that my college flute professor had said, and I was like, it finally clicked. Like, I wish I could. I just need to write her and be like, remember the thing you said like 6 years ago? Like, it finally happened. Yeah, like it finally happened.
This episode is sponsored by AVS. Together, we are redefining what it means to be a musical community. Rather than a single central studio, our presence is woven into the fabric of our city. You'll find us in boutique practice rooms strategically placed at the heart of the action, from Rock City, Allston to across from the Symphony in Back Bay. We gather in local pubs, breweries, at local open mics, channeling our resources into getting singers out of the practice room and onto stages in the greater Boston area. What I think is fun and interesting that you said, though, is you transitioned out of music because there was, or I shouldn't say that, let me backtrack. You didn't transition out of music because you still play, but you transitioned from it being the main gig. Because there was sort of a dependency on it for income, or maybe it was not as stable in some ways, and so you were looking for other avenues. But then you ended up in something where it was also entrepreneurial and it was also self-driven. So do you think that's just part of who you are? Do you think there's a difference between sort of what a photography business offers you and what like a private teacher would offer you? What do you think?
Yeah, I actually have thought about this so much. And for that, actually don't think I have an answer. But the thing that's very funny is that when I was growing up, my dad had his own business in our house. And I jokingly said for years and years and years, I never want to be self-employed. I don't enjoy, like, I'm very much a person who needs a lot of interaction. I wouldn't say I'm extroverted, but I just really enjoy being around people, and my time that I need alone to myself to recoup is very minimal. So I always said, like, I want to be part of a team. I like being around people. I want that, I guess, stability, but I really like being involved in the music industry in this way. And then things just happened. I do remember, though, there was a point where I was trying to start a private studio, and I had a couple of students, but I still just felt like oddly really lonely, and it didn't
Mm.
feel like there was just something that it didn't feel quite right. And to this day, I can't particularly pinpoint what it was. I don't know if um I don't know if it wasn't meant to be, but I think in another life, maybe I think that could have been it. And I would have really enjoyed that. At the same time, I do think I know there's people doing amazing work in this, but I personally still kind of rub up against a lot of the classical music world tendencies that are just really, really ingrained. And I think being a photographer where there are rules in photography, but it is very much your style. And when people work with me, they're kind of signing up for my style just applied to them. And I kind of find in the classical music world, this could be totally wrong. And I think people make it their own, but I just had a hard time making things my own. And that could have very much been my skill set at the time, just wasn't strong enough to be able to make those decisions. But I think I just have a lot of creative choice and freedom now. And I think the thing for me that stood out the most is that I'm able to bring my personal missions or beliefs forward, and it's a lot easier in the work that I'm doing now. I'm really big believer in just making sure that people feel as comfortable as possible working with me. I For different photographers, there's different styles. And so for me, I really like having like true to, skin tone edits. Um, and also just working with people with, similar beliefs and making the world a better, open, more loving place. So I think in essence, it's just where I've landed that I feel like I can make the most impact in the way that I want to.
Yeah, you found your space.
Yeah. Well said.
I think that's great. And one of our themes throughout the podcast is we love music, but it doesn't have to be the main focus for everyone. And if it is, it's often something that gets intertwined into what they're already doing. Like, I love that, you'll have to give us some links or things to look at because I don't want to point people to the wrong place. But I love that when you were doing more of the marketing, it was centered on musicians. Like, you had websites for musicians, or you had photography for classical musicians. Like, you found your niche from something that you already knew and that was already a part of you. And you said, okay, I'm going to do this new thing, but I'm not cutting this part out. Like, I'm going to still integrate it, because why would you just cut that part out? Like, it was years
Yeah.
and years of work, right? And so I tell students that often, like, okay, you're in software engineering. Great. Make yourself a website.
Yeah.
Make
Nice.
yourself a website for your music. That's a great use of time, and
Yeah.
it's probably fun because it's an avenue that you don't usually do at work, and you're using both skill sets. So why not?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's super cool to see people like I work with some of the conservatories around here doing like headshot events for them. And it's super cool to see these people who are so, so passionate about what they do. And I love getting it's such a treat for me, but getting musicians to play a little bit or sing a little bit when I'm
Yeah.
doing their photo shoot. And I'm like, yes, this is for the photos, but it's also just a little treat for me. So I just get to be around that in all these different capacities. And also so true, like in my free time, I really like songwriting, and just like I also play guitar a little bit, and it's just really fun to like still be connected to music in a totally different way. But yeah, I think that's like, I think if you're creative, or just love music. Like, I don't think anyone is just loves one thing. We're just multi-passionate people. And I definitely think the world is heading in that direction with careers and just enjoyment. And you never just have to do one thing.
Yeah, people who have been listening to the podcast know that I kind of get on my soapbox about this, but I I struggle with a lot of the language around creativity and entrepreneurship that people use, like, oh, I'm a creative, or you have the opposite side saying, oh, you can only do one thing, and like you get these like very black and white statements out in the world, especially I think if you're leading your own business because people don't quite understand what it is that we're doing. And frankly, sometimes I don't think we do either. I think there's a lot of like, I'm going to try this. And if it works, great.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't, that's okay too. But that's how I would define what my job is. Like when people ask me what it is to like be an entrepreneur or be a creative, I'm like, well, I try a lot of things. And when I find the thing that sticks, I go really deep into it.
Yeah.
Well, I try a lot of things. It's not like, oh, I did this one thing and I do it intently or intensely for ever and that's it. Like that would not be functional.
No. And with that, I don't think that failure exists either. It's just
Right.
trying something. And then if it's not working, then you try something else.
Yeah. And there's a lot of emotion wrapped up into that too, I think.
Yeah.
And I think that's the part where maybe people listening to this are like, well, why? Because they're like, doesn't that feel bad? I'm like, yeah, it can feel really bad, but it can also feel really good.
Yeah.
And I think that when you find the thing that sticks, when you find your space, there's no other feeling like that.
Yeah. And it's also information. Like, for example, like I've done headshot events and sold them out with like, there was one I did, I think it was sometime in the fall, and it sold out in like an hour. And it was like, this is insane. This has never happened. And then there's others where I've had one person sign up and it's not a failure. It's just information, or I'm going to make that one spot really special for that one person. Like it's just what you make of it at the end of the day.
Wow, we could do a podcast in my next question alone, but how do you measure that information? Like briefly, like overview, how do you sort of quantify that for yourself?
I definitely take it as, I think about it from the marketing standpoint. Did I not give it enough time or, to get to people, or maybe I just don't have the right audience for this yet and I need to connect with other people. It's just a lot of information. Also, sometimes I'm like, you know what? I did book this thing or I scheduled this thing and I'm also exhausted. And maybe it's totally fine that this didn't work out in the way I wanted. And I'm actually just going to go get coffee after. And that's going to be great. And I can maybe just relax and have more energy for the next thing. Like, I think it's just like reevaluating and pivoting and seeing maybe what didn't quote unquote work out. But I don't think I think I'll be bummed, but at the end of the day, it's my own goals. And as long as I'm meeting my own financial, necessities and working to get something, I know that something else is going to come my way. I'm a big believer in that. Like if this didn't happen, I'm going to figure something else out, or something else is going to come my way, or I'm going to meet someone else or put myself out there, go to this thing, and that's going to get the ball rolling. Like I don't think anything is ever just done or that's it. It's just a continuation of what I make of it.
This episode is sponsored by Piano for the Vocalist. Piano for the Vocalist is your ultimate resource for unlocking the skills to self-accompany with confidence. This largely free program is focused on teaching singers to use collaborative piano techniques for vocal performance rather than traditional piano skills, empowering you to accompany yourself with ease. Yeah, it's funny because we had someone on the podcast from an ad agency, and I said, "What's the difference between like a smaller business that comes to you and a larger business?" And she was like, "Well, the smaller businesses have a lot more room and what their rules are, and like what what their goals are. Like if something doesn't work with a small business, they just pivot.
Yeah.
And with the larger business, we have to go through all of these like red tape and like, checkpoints. But when it's just like I'm working with the owner and I'm like, oh, this didn't work, you go, okay, let's try something else. And she's
Yeah.
like, there's a lot of freedom in that. And I was like, oh, I never thought about that because we sort of self-impose, like you said, the goals or what the benchmarks are. And if we don't reach them, sometimes I think, well, I get upset. But then it's like, well, I made this in the first place.
Yeah.
So, okay, I guess I should change that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I will say there's definitely a difference between being a sole proprietor and someone who has employees, because there's definitely a lot more at stake and a lot more pressure. I I would joke with this to my friends and family, but I put enough pressure on myself. Like, I don't need to do that for other people too. But when you have employees or teachers or whatever, like, of course, there's a lot more at stake because you're caring about their success too. So I will put that out there with a grain of salt. I think it's a lot easier for me to kind of call shots and be okay if things don't work out, potentially. But um, it is interesting when I have worked with companies, what it looks like for them and all of these different people that I have to be in touch with just to even get in the door for an event or something like that. It's just
Mm,
really fascinating to see because I've never worked, like my college was small. The first business I worked for was small. I've never
sure.
been a part of anything large. So I always feel like such an outsider, in a not good or bad way, but just it's so interesting to observe how things work for them. And also, I am so glad I never have to use corporate jargon either. I don't think I would survive.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that. And we're still a relatively small team. I think we range between 5 and 6 people on our team. Sometimes it's smaller than that, sometimes it's bigger, but it is true, and this isn't pushback to what you said because I think you're absolutely right. Like things shifted when I brought on team members. But it's funny because in some ways things had to shift even more so in the direction of my necessities are meeting financial goals so that I can pay the team. Like that's you got to pay employees obviously, right? So
Yeah.
that's number 1. But the second thing is if things don't work, I have to pivot because it's another person. It's almost like I was more stubborn with myself than I could
Mm,
be with another individual because and I say this to people a lot when they're first starting out and they want to grow their team because sometimes I work with music studio, I don't want to say owners, but who are just starting out, who want to establish a student list, and they're thinking of bringing on another teacher. You don't and shouldn't think that you have control of another person. You have expectations where you hope your team members will meet you, but you have no control over another human being, and you shouldn't have any control over another human being. So you have to find it within yourself to say, this isn't working. How can I best support you so that we
yeah.
meet this shared value set? But yeah, I mean, in some ways, you have to go even deeper into
Yeah.
it's just not about the original goal.
So true. One thing, I haven't talked about this a ton, but I think it's just kind of funny and it makes being your own boss or even if you have employees too, like makes it a little bit easier is I call my roommate and then my close friends and my parents, my board of advisors. So whenever I'm being, they're for free. But whenever I'm being like super hard on myself or like I don't feel like I have my own best intention or I'm maybe like selling myself short, I'll say like, okay, here's a situation. Like, what do you think? Because I think they'll be a little bit maybe kinder or even sterner with me than I'm being with myself and being like, no, that's like, selling yourself short. You're not going to make an even profit from this. You need to actually like do this thing. And it's been so helpful. I really love like outsourcing issues if I've kind of run the works for myself. And, there's like a joke that's when you're like completely self-employed that you sit at a table that's like there's 7 chairs and you're like, all right, time for a team meeting. And it's just like all of your own thoughts. So it's, I think, so great to just know other people who know you really well and get to, you know, channel them and what they would say. Just it makes it a little bit easier.
Yeah, for sure. Sometimes like I need to consult my advisors here, and then I'm on the phone with my parents like, "Hey,
Yeah.
so what do you think of this?" And so,
Yeah.
that it doesn't change just because you're running the thing.
Yeah.
Um so let's bring it full circle. I always like to ask at the end of the podcast, if you were to give one piece of practical advice, if you were to leave the listeners with something, what would it be?
Well, I think it's kind of what we talked about at the beginning. I would say that we are all lifelong learners and we always have the ability to access our skills or learn from someone else and make choices. You're never done with something unless you want to be, and it's never success or failure. It's just enjoyment, or if you're not enjoying it anymore, then you don't have to do it. Like we get to make all of these choices and we have this one life, so make the most of it. Take the voice lesson if you want to sing, do the thing if you want to do it. Like life's, I think, too short to not do the thing that you love.
Absolutely. And I do have to end on a plug here. So Taylor and I are doing a joint event come July. We are doing a headshot day for artists, so that you can get your next album cover or LinkedIn photo, whatever you prefer. So please come join us. Come chat with us. We would love to hear your thoughts on everything we talked about today, and you would get a nice picture out of it. The first 3 signups are complimentary from AVS, so you will get free photos. Please come join us, meet us, hang out with us, and we can't wait to see you there.
Yeah, it's going to be a great time.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Taylor. Not the last conversation we'll have, I'm sure, and can't wait to see you then.
Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.